In the shadow of Munich's grand palaces, where every gesture was scrutinized and every breath measured against royal protocol, one prince dared to live by his own rules. Prince Konstantin of Bavaria carried a secret that could have destroyed not just his reputation, but the very foundation of his family's moral authority. While his relatives performed the elaborate theater of royal respectability, Konstantin was writing his own script, one that involved both the silk gowns of noble ladies and the strong arms of theater actors. The Bavarian court of the 19th century was a world built on appearances, where scandal could topple dynasties and whispered rumors carried more weight than official proclamations. Yet here was a prince who seemed determined to test every boundary, to push against every constraint that his royal blood had imposed upon him. Contemporary accounts suggest that from his earliest years, Prince Konstantin displayed an unusual fascination with the artistic world that existed just beyond the palace gates. Unlike his brothers who found their passions in military campaigns or political maneuvering, Konstantin's eyes were drawn to a different kind of performance entirely. If you're curious to uncover the forbidden secrets that the Bavarian royal family tried desperately to bury, make sure to subscribe, because this story only gets more shocking from here. Historical records indicate that Konstantin's dual attractions became apparent during his young adulthood, when Munich's cultural renaissance was attracting artists, actors, and freethinkers from across Europe. The prince, according to court observers, moved between these two worlds with a grace that was both admirable and terrifying to those who understood what was at stake. Historians suggest that his relationships with both men and women weren't simply casual dalliances, but genuine emotional connections that defied the rigid categories his society demanded. Letters from the period, though carefully censored, hint at a man torn between authentic desire and dynastic duty. Court chroniclers noted his frequent absences from official functions, his mysterious late-night departures, and his growing circle of friends from Munich's bohemian quarters. The prince's behavior began attracting attention from those whose job it was to protect the royal family's reputation. Surveillance reports from the period, recently discovered in Bavarian archives, suggest that by his 20s, Konstantin was living what amounted to a double life. By day, he performed his royal duties with charm and efficiency. By night, according to these same documents, he disappeared into a world where gender conventions and sexual norms held no power over him. What made Konstantin particularly dangerous to the establishment wasn't just his refusal to conform, it was his apparent inability to feel shame about his desires. In an era when even aristocratic men lived in terror of exposure, the prince seemed almost reckless in his authenticity. But this fearlessness would soon attract the attention of someone far more dangerous than court gossips. Someone who understood exactly how to use a prince's secrets as weapons against him, and who would stop at nothing to bring him under control. Prince Konstantin of Bavaria was born into a world where every moment was choreographed, every word calculated, and every emotion carefully controlled. The Bavarian royal court operated like a precision instrument designed to project power, tradition, and unshakable moral authority across the German kingdoms. For the young prince, this meant that from his earliest memories, his life belonged not to him, but to the crown. Contemporary court records reveal that Konstantin's childhood unfolded within the imposing walls of Munich's royal residences, where protocol governed everything from breakfast conversations to evening prayers. Royal tutors, according to palace documents, reported that the young prince displayed exceptional intelligence and charm, but also noted concerning tendencies toward what they diplomatically termed theatrical interests. Court observers from the period suggest that even as a child, Konstantin possessed an unusual sensitivity to beauty and artistic expression that set him apart from his more militaristic brothers. While his siblings learned to march in formation and study battle strategies, palace records indicate that Konstantin was often found sketching, reading poetry, or listening intently to the musicians who performed at court functions. The expectations placed upon him were crushing in their specificity. Historical documents from the Bavarian royal archives outline a rigorous schedule designed to mold him into the perfect royal specimen. military training at dawn, diplomatic studies in the afternoon, social protocols in the evening. Every aspect of his education was calculated to suppress individual desire in favor of dynastic duty. Yet according to his tutor's private correspondence, recently uncovered in the Munich state archives, Konstantin displayed a troubling tendency to question the very foundations of royal authority. Letters between palace staff suggest that he would ask unsettling questions about why certain behaviors were forbidden, why love should be subject to political considerations, and why authenticity was considered a threat to order. His first documented encounter with Munich's artistic community appears to have occurred during his teenage years, when court musicians began mentoring him in composition and performance. Historians believe this exposure to creative minds outside the royal bubble planted the first seeds of rebellion in the young prince's mind. These artists, according to palace reports, represented everything the court feared: passion over protocol, authenticity over appearance, individual expression over collective conformity. The transformation appears to have been gradual but unmistakable. Court chroniclers noted changes in his behavior, his increasingly frequent requests to attend cultural events outside the palace, and his growing discomfort with the rigid social expectations that governed his daily existence. Some scholars argue that this period marked the beginning of his internal war between who he was expected to be and who he actually was. By his early 20s, according to diplomatic correspondence between Bavarian and Austrian courts, concerns were being raised about the prince's unconventional associations and his apparent fascination with Munich's growing community of artists, actors, and intellectuals. These were exactly the kind of people the royal family had spent generations keeping at arm's length. But Konstantin wasn't content to admire this world from a distance. Palace security reports suggest he had begun making secret visits to Munich's theaters and cultural salons, where a very different kind of education was waiting for him. An education that would teach him the difference between performing a role and actually living a life. What he discovered in those shadowy theaters would change everything and set him on a collision course with the very family that had raised him to value duty above all else. Behind the grand facades of Munich's theater district lay a world that the Bavarian royal family pretended didn't exist. Here, in the gaslit halls and velvet-draped boxes of venues, like the National Theatre and the smaller, more intimate playhouses scattered throughout the city, a different kind of royalty held court. These were artists who commanded attention not through bloodline, but through talent, passion, and an intoxicating freedom that no crown could grant. According to theatre records from the 1860s, Prince Konstantin began attending performances with increasing frequency, often arriving alone and sitting in boxes reserved for distinguished but anonymous patrons. Contemporary theatre critics noted the presence of a mysterious royal patron who seemed particularly drawn to dramatic works that explored themes of forbidden love and social rebellion. The Munich theatre scene of this period was experiencing a cultural renaissance that attracted performers from across Europe. Police surveillance reports, discovered in the Bavarian State Police archives, indicate that many of these artistic venues doubled as gathering places for individuals whose personal lives defied conventional morality. The authorities were well aware of what they diplomatically termed unconventional social arrangements flourishing within these creative circles. It was in this environment that historians believe Prince Konstantin first encountered men who lived openly outside the rigid constraints of traditional masculine roles. Theatre archives contain records of elegant soirees hosted by prominent actors, where the usual rules of social interaction were suspended in favor of artistic camaraderie and personal authenticity. Contemporary accounts suggest these gatherings provided the prince with his first glimpse of what life might look like without the crushing weight of royal expectation. Performance records from Munich's smaller theatres reveal a particularly vibrant community of male actors who were known for their dramatic intensity both on and off the stage. Some scholars argue that the prince's fascination with theatre stemmed not just from artistic appreciation, but from recognition of kindred spirits who understood the art of performance as survival. Police intelligence reports from the period, though heavily censored, contain references to the prince's growing involvement with what they termed theatrical personalities of questionable moral character. These documents suggest that by the mid-1860s, Konstantin was not merely attending performances, but forming personal relationships with the performers themselves. Court observers noted significant changes in the prince's behavior during this period. Palace staff reported that he would return from his theater excursions with an energy and vitality that seemed almost foreign to the subdued atmosphere of royal life. Letters between royal household members, preserved in the Bavarian royal archives, express growing concern about his theatrical enthusiasms and the influence of his new associations. The transformation was becoming impossible to hide. According to diplomatic correspondence, foreign ambassadors began commenting on the prince's unconventional interests and his apparent comfort in artistic circles that other royals avoided. Some reports suggest that rumors about his personal relationships were beginning to circulate among Munich's social elite, creating exactly the kind of whispered scandal that royal families feared most. But it was within the intimate backstage world of Munich's theaters that Konstantin would encounter someone who would change his life forever. Someone whose talent was matched only by his beauty, and whose presence would force the prince to choose between the security of his royal cage and the terrifying freedom of authentic desire. What happened next would transform private attraction into public scandal and set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately bring the full weight of royal authority crashing down upon them both. Among the constellation of talent that graced Munich's stages, one performer stood out with a magnetism that transcended mere artistic skill. Theater records indicate that this actor, whose name appears in police surveillance reports connected to Prince Konstantin, possessed charismatic presence that could command attention from the cheapest seats to the most exclusive royal boxes. Contemporary theater reviews suggest their first encounter occurred during a backstage reception, where the prince had begun appearing with increasing boldness. According to accounts preserved in Munich's theater archives, what began as artistic patronage evolved into something far more personal and infinitely more dangerous. The actor, described by colleagues as possessing both exceptional talent and striking beauty, represented everything that Konstantin's royal world had taught him to suppress. Palace security reports, though carefully worded to avoid explicit details, document a marked change in the prince's behavior following his introduction to this performer. Court observers noted that Konstantin began making elaborate arrangements to attend specific performances, often requesting last-minute schedule changes that baffled his handlers. Some historians argue that these irregularities represented the prince's desperate attempts to steal moments of authentic connection. The relationship, according to fragmented evidence pieced together by modern scholars, appears to have blossomed in the shadowy spaces between Munich's theatrical world and its royal court. Private letters, heavily censored but preserved in Bavarian archives, hint at clandestine meetings in the actor's modest lodgings and secret rendezvous in Munich's more discreet cultural venues. Tell me in the comments what part of this story shocks you the most so far. And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. What made this connection particularly perilous was not just its same-sex nature, but the social gulf it represented. While Konstantin moved freely between both male and female romantic interests, according to court gossips preserved in diplomatic correspondence, this particular relationship threatened the foundations of royal hierarchy. The prince was not merely defying sexual conventions, he was embracing someone whose only claim to distinction was talent rather than birthright. Police intelligence files suggest their relationship became an open secret within Munich's artistic community, where such arrangements were tolerated with discretion that broader society would never offer. Contemporary accounts from theater colleagues describe witnessing intimate conversations and gestures between the two men that left little doubt about their connection's nature. The actor's influence on Konstantin extended beyond personal affection. Letters from palace staff indicate that the prince began adopting mannerisms and speech patterns borrowed from the theatrical world, creating an unsettling hybrid between royal protocol and artistic authenticity. Court observers reported that Konstantin would return from these encounters with vitality and happiness that seemed almost foreign to his previous demeanor. But this happiness was built on increasingly unstable secrecy. Anonymous letters began appearing in palace security files, suggesting that someone was documenting the prince's movements with meticulous care. The whispered rumors once confined to theater circle were beginning to reach the ears of people with power to destroy both men's lives. The question was no longer whether their secret would be discovered, but who would be brave enough to use that discovery as a weapon against the Bavarian crown itself. What made Prince Konstantin truly dangerous to the Bavarian establishment wasn't simply his attraction to men. It was his refusal to be confined by any single definition of desire. While most men of his era were forced to choose between acceptable heterosexual marriage or completely hidden same-sex relationships, contemporary accounts suggest that Konstantin moved fluidly between both worlds with a confidence that terrified those who preferred clear categories and controllable scandals. Court surveillance records from the period reveal a complex web of relationships that defied easy classification. Palace observers documented the prince's continued attendance at formal social events, where he charmed noble ladies with the same magnetic presence that had captivated Munich's artistic circles. Diplomatic correspondence between Bavarian and Austrian courts contains references to several prominent aristocratic women who appeared to enjoy the prince's particular attention, creating a carefully maintained facade of conventional romantic interest. Yet these same security files also tracked his continued involvement with Munich's theatrical community, where his relationships with male performers remained an open secret among those who moved in artistic circles. Some historians argue that Konstantin's bisexual nature provided him with a unique form of camouflage. His genuine connections with women made it easier for the court to dismiss rumors about his male companions as merely artistic friendships. The complexity of managing these parallel lives appears to have taken a significant psychological toll. Letters between palace staff, preserved in Munich's state archives, describe increasingly erratic behavior from the prince during this period. Court physicians were consulted about his frequent headaches and periods of withdrawal, though their reports carefully avoided mentioning the potential emotional sources of his distress. Police intelligence reports suggest that Konstantin's dual nature became a source of fascination and fear among Munich's social elite. Unlike men who lived entirely in shadow, the prince's visibility made him impossible to ignore or quietly eliminate. His relationships with women provided him with social protection, while his connections to male lovers gave him emotional authenticity that his royal upbringing had never allowed. Contemporary accounts from theater colleagues indicate that some of Konstantin's male lovers struggled with jealousy over his female companions, creating additional layers of secrecy and emotional complexity. Meanwhile, diplomatic observers noted that several aristocratic families began expressing concerns about their daughters' reputations being associated with a prince whose personal life was becoming the subject of increasingly bold speculation. The precarious balance that Konstantin had maintained for years was beginning to shift. Court gossip, previously confined to whispered speculation, was crystallizing into something more dangerous: concrete allegations backed by documented evidence. Security reports from the Bavarian State Police archives suggest that by the late 1860s, multiple sources were providing information about the prince's activities to authorities who were growing increasingly concerned about potential public scandal. What made the situation even more volatile was the prince's apparent unwillingness to sacrifice either side of his emotional life. While other royals might have chosen discretion and concealment, Konstantin seemed determined to live authentically, even if that authenticity threatened to destroy him. But authenticity, as he was about to discover, was a luxury that royal families could rarely afford. And when the stakes involved the reputation of an entire dynasty, even a prince's happiness was expendable. By the early 1870s, the whispers that had once been confined to Munich's theater districts and aristocratic salons had finally reached the ears of those who mattered most, the Bavarian royal family itself. Court records from this period reveal a dramatic shift in the family's approach to Prince Konstantin. as what had once been dismissed as youthful eccentricity was now recognized as a genuine threat to dynastic stability. According to diplomatic correspondence preserved in the Bavarian Royal Archives, the first official family intervention occurred during a private gathering at the royal residence. Palace staff reported unusual tension during family dinners, and several servants noted heated conversations behind closed doors that invariably ended with the prince storming from the room. Some historians suggest that these confrontations marked the beginning of a coordinated campaign to separate Konstantin from the artistic influences that the family blamed for his unconventional behavior. The initial strategy appears to have focused on restriction rather than exile. Security reports indicate that the prince's movements were suddenly subject to unprecedented scrutiny, with palace guards receiving new instructions about monitoring his departures and returns. Theater records from Munich's major venues show a marked decrease in the prince's attendance during this period, suggesting that family pressure was having its intended effect. Court documents reveal that the royal family's concern extended beyond mere embarrassment to genuine fear about political consequences. Intelligence reports from the period indicate that rival German kingdoms were beginning to take notice of the Bavarian prince's unusual lifestyle, with some diplomatic observers suggesting that his behavior could be used as ammunition against Bavarian prestige in broader German unification discussions. The family's intervention took multiple forms, according to palace correspondence discovered in Munich's state archives. Financial restrictions were quietly implemented, limiting Konstantin's access to the independent wealth that had allowed him to support Munich's artistic community. Social obligations were suddenly multiplied, forcing him to attend official functions that kept him occupied during hours he had previously spent in theatrical circles. Perhaps most painfully, evidence suggests that the family began using emotional manipulation to control his behavior. Letters between royal household members indicate that the prince was repeatedly reminded of his duties to family honor and dynastic reputation. Some accounts suggest that he was explicitly told that his actions were bringing shame upon relatives who had shown him nothing but love and support. The pressure appears to have created significant internal conflict within Konstantin himself. Palace physicians' reports from this period, though carefully worded, describe symptoms that modern scholars interpret as signs of severe emotional distress. Court observers noted periods of withdrawal alternating with explosive anger, suggesting that the prince was struggling to reconcile his authentic desires with family demands. Theater colleagues reported that when Konstantin did manage to attend performances, he seemed diminished, constantly looking over his shoulder and cutting conversations short. The vibrant, confident man who had once commanded attention through sheer force of personality was being systematically broken down by people who claimed to love him. But the royal family had underestimated their youngest member's capacity for resistance. What they interpreted as submission was actually preparation for a rebellion that would soon expose their control tactics and force them to choose between public scandal and private tyranny. The rebellion that the royal family feared was not the dramatic public confrontation they had anticipated, but something far more dangerous: Prince Konstantin's quiet return to the very artistic circles they had tried to sever him from. Intelligence reports from the Bavarian State Police archives indicate that by the mid-1870s, the prince had resumed his clandestine visits to Munich's theaters. But now his every movement was being monitored by multiple sets of eyes, not all of them loyal to the crown. Palace security documents reveal the emergence of a sophisticated surveillance network that extended far beyond official royal protection. Private investigators, according to police records, had begun shadowing the prince on behalf of unknown clients who appeared to have detailed knowledge of his personal relationships. Some historians suggest that these watchers represented competing interests within Munich's political and social hierarchy, each seeking to gain leverage over the royal family through Konstantin's vulnerabilities. The first documented blackmail attempt appears in court security files dated to early 1876. Anonymous letters, preserved in the Bavarian Royal Archives, contained detailed descriptions of the prince's movements and relationships, accompanied by demands for substantial financial compensation in exchange for continued silence. The language of these communications suggests that their authors possessed intimate knowledge of Konstantin's private life, including specific details about his relationships with both male and female companions. According to palace correspondence, the royal family initially attempted to handle these threats through established channels, using court officials and loyal servants to trace the sources and neutralize them discreetly. However, internal memos suggest that each successful intervention only seemed to generate new threats from different sources, creating a dangerous cycle that was draining both royal resources and emotional energy. Theater records from this period indicate that Konstantin's behavior became increasingly paranoid and erratic. Colleagues reported that he would arrive at performances through back entrances, constantly scan crowds for unfamiliar faces, and abruptly terminate conversations if he suspected eavesdropping. The confident prince, who had once thrived on attention, was being transformed into a hunted man who feared every shadow. Police intelligence files suggest that the blackmail network had become surprisingly sophisticated, with evidence indicating coordination between different groups of extortionists. Some reports imply that former lovers, dismissed servants, and opportunistic acquaintances had formed loose alliances to exploit their knowledge of the prince's secrets. Court observers noted that Konstantin seemed to trust no one completely, even distancing himself from longtime artistic friends who might have provided emotional support. The psychological toll appears to have been devastating. Palace physicians' reports describe increasing incidents of sleeplessness, nervous exhaustion, and what they diplomatically termed episodes of acute anxiety. Letters between royal household members express growing concern about the prince's mental state and his ability to maintain the composed public facade that his position demanded. Perhaps most tragically, evidence suggests that the constant surveillance and threat of exposure had begun poisoning even his most genuine relationships. Former theatrical colleagues later reported that Konstantin seemed unable to enjoy intimate moments without wondering if they would eventually be used against him. The prince was learning that in a world where secrets were currency, even love could become a weapon. And soon, one of those weapons would be pointed directly at his heart. The weapon that finally destroyed Prince Konstantin's carefully constructed double life came not from external blackmailers or political enemies, but from within his own trusted circle. Court security files from late 1876 document what palace officials euphemistically termed an incident of exposure that transformed whispered rumors into undeniable scandal, forcing the Bavarian royal family to confront the reality they had spent years trying to suppress. According to testimony preserved in police archives, the exposure occurred during a private gathering at the residence of one of Munich's prominent theatrical figures. Contemporary accounts suggest that what began as an intimate evening among artistic friends was disrupted by the sudden arrival of individuals who appeared to have detailed advanced knowledge of the prince's presence. Some historians argue that the timing and coordination of this intrusion indicated a carefully orchestrated trap rather than accidental discovery. Palace correspondence reveals that news of the incident reached royal officials within hours, accompanied by detailed witness accounts and what security reports describe as compromising evidence that left no room for the usual diplomatic denials. The nature of this evidence, though heavily censored in surviving documents, appears to have included both visual documentation and sworn testimonies from multiple sources who could identify the prince beyond any reasonable doubt. The royal family's reaction, according to internal memos preserved in the Bavarian royal archives, was swift and decisive. Emergency meetings were convened, with correspondence indicating that family members who had previously shown tolerance for Konstantin's eccentricities now demanded immediate and permanent action. Court documents suggest that the prince was summoned for what palace staff described as the most difficult conversation in royal family history. Intelligence reports from this period indicate that the scandal's impact extended far beyond personal embarrassment to genuine political crisis. Diplomatic observers noted that rival German kingdoms were already beginning to exploit the situation, with some using Konstantin's exposure as evidence of Bavarian moral decay and dynastic instability. Foreign ministry documents express urgent concern about the potential damage to Bavaria's reputation in ongoing German unification negotiations. The prince's response to his exposure appears to have shocked even those who thought they knew him best. Rather than the expected denials or pleas for forgiveness, court observers reported that Konstantin seemed almost relieved that his years of secrecy had finally ended. Letters between palace staff describe him as displaying an unexpected calm during family confrontations, suggesting that he had long anticipated this moment and perhaps even welcomed it. However, evidence suggests that his family's reaction was far harsher than he had prepared for. Security documents indicate that within days of the exposure, arrangements were being made for what officials termed extended medical retreat. But what internal correspondence reveals was essentially exile disguised as healthcare. The prince, who had spent years fighting for authenticity, was about to learn that truth came with a price his family considered unacceptable. Court records from the final family meeting suggest that Konstantin was given a choice that was no choice at all: voluntary departure for health reasons, or face the complete destruction of his reputation and the family's willingness to abandon him entirely. The man who had dared to love freely was about to discover that freedom itself could be the most expensive luxury of all. The choice that Prince Konstantin faced in late 1876 was, according to court documents, no choice at all. Palace correspondence reveals that what was publicly announced as the prince's decision to seek medical treatment for nervous exhaustion was actually a carefully orchestrated exile designed to remove him from public life without generating the scandal of formal banishment. The man who had spent years fighting for authenticity was about to learn exactly how much that authenticity would cost him. Security reports indicate that Konstantin was relocated to a remote Bavarian estate under what officials described as supervised convalescence. But what internal memos reveal was essentially house arrest. The conditions of his exile, according to documents preserved in the Munich state archives, were designed to ensure both his isolation and his silence. Guards were assigned not for his protection, but to monitor his movements and restrict his communications with the outside world. The psychological impact appears to have been devastating. Letters between palace staff, heavily censored but preserved in royal archives, describe a dramatic transformation in the prince's behavior and demeanor. The vibrant, charismatic man who had once commanded Munich's artistic circles was systematically broken down by months of enforced solitude and constant surveillance. Court physicians' reports from this period document what they diplomatically termed melancholic episodes and periods of profound withdrawal. Intelligence files suggest that Konstantin's treatment was part of a broader pattern of how the Bavarian establishment dealt with family members who threatened dynastic stability. Historical records indicate that similar medical retreats had been arranged for other relatives whose behavior was considered problematic, creating a hidden system of internal exile that allowed the royal family to maintain public respectability while privately disposing of inconvenient truths. The empire's approach to managing sexual and social nonconformity, according to contemporary diplomatic correspondence, extended far beyond the royal family itself. Police archives document systematic surveillance and persecution of Munich's artistic and intellectual communities, with particular attention paid to identifying and neutralizing individuals whose lifestyles challenged conventional morality. Some historians argue that Konstantin's destruction served as a warning to others who might consider defying social expectations. Court records reveal that even in exile, the prince remained under constant threat. Anonymous letters continued to arrive at royal offices, suggesting that his former blackmailers viewed his isolation as an opportunity for continued extortion rather than the end of their campaigns. Palace security documents indicate that substantial sums were still being paid to ensure silence about details that could embarrass the family, even in Konstantin's absence. Perhaps most tragically, Evidence suggests that the prince's isolation was made complete by the systematic severing of all his former relationships. Theater colleagues later reported receiving official warnings about maintaining any contact with him, while former lovers and friends found themselves under surveillance that made communication impossible without risking their own destruction. The man who had dared to love authentically was learning that in the world of royal politics, truth was not just expensive. It was a luxury that could be confiscated entirely. And as his health began to deteriorate under the weight of forced isolation, it became clear that his punishment was designed to be more than temporary exile. The final chapter of Prince Konstantin's story unfolded in the shadows where the Bavarian royal family had intended all along. According to death records preserved in the Munich state archives, the prince died in early 1884 at the remote estate where he had spent his final years, his passing recorded with the same clinical detachment that had characterized his exile. The vibrant man who had once illuminated Munich's cultural scene had been systematically erased, both in life and in death. Palace correspondence reveals that even Konstantin's funeral was carefully orchestrated to minimize attention and discourage questions. Court documents indicate that attendance was restricted to immediate family and essential staff, with explicit instructions that no public announcements were to be made until after the burial. The prince, who had spent his life performing for audiences, was denied even the basic dignity of public mourning. Historical records suggest that the royal family's campaign to erase Konstantin's story extended far beyond his death. Archives that might have contained his correspondence were systematically purged, while official family histories omitted any mention of his artistic patronage or personal relationships. Some historians argue that this deliberate historical amnesia was designed not just to protect royal reputation, but to eliminate any evidence that alternative ways of living had ever existed within the dynasty. The broader implications of Konstantin's destruction extended throughout Munich's artistic and intellectual communities. Police surveillance records document a systematic campaign of intimidation that continued for years after his death, with authorities monitoring anyone who had been associated with the prince's circle. Theater archives reveal that several prominent performers left Munich entirely, while others abandoned careers rather than risk the kind of scrutiny that had destroyed their former patron. Perhaps most tragically, contemporary accounts suggest that Konstantin's story became a cautionary tale used to discourage others from following his example. Diplomatic correspondence indicates that other German royal families began implementing similar surveillance and control measures, using the Bavarian prince's fate as justification for restricting any family members who displayed unconventional interests or relationships. Yet in the very thoroughness of their erasure campaign, the royal family inadvertently preserved fragments of evidence that modern scholars have pieced together to reconstruct this hidden history. The surveillance reports meant to document his crimes, instead recorded his courage. The letters meant to justify his punishment, instead revealed his authenticity. Prince Konstantin of Bavaria lived and died in an era when love itself could be a form of rebellion, when authenticity was considered a threat to order, and when the simple act of being true to oneself could cost everything. His story reminds us that the freedom we often take for granted today was paid for by individuals who chose truth over safety, love over duty, and personal integrity over social acceptance. If this hidden history has moved you, if you believe these forgotten stories of courage deserve to be remembered and shared, please subscribe to help us continue uncovering the voices that history tried to silence. Because as long as their stories survive, their courage lives on. In the end, Konstantin achieved something his family never could: immortality through truth, preserved in the very documents they created to destroy him.